United Arts Fund in 1999 by York's corporate leaders, the Cultural Alliance's annual campaign has raised more than $10 million cash and more than $2 million in kind support to provide essential funding to York's cultural community. Over the past few years, the Cultural Alliance and their arts partners have seen historic patterns of art support shifting in our community. And in 2017, started an in-depth design thinking process with partner DesignQuake to identify how to reposition the organization for relevance and sustainability that will ensure arts and culture in York will thrive for years to come. Kelley Gibson, new president of the Cultural Alliance of York County, will share the findings of their year-long listening project and plans for completely remodeling the organization over the next few years to be able to support York's creative community now and in the years to come. Before being named president, Kelley served for 5 years as the Director of Communications and Engagement at the Cultural Alliance. Prior to joining the Cultural Alliance, Kelley worked for IMWave Inc., an online marketing firm based in York, where she held an account management position and launched effective online marketing campaigns for a multitude of national and international clients. Kelley started her career in the arts by becoming the first ever Director of Marketing and Development for York Arts Center, a partner agency of the Cultural Alliance. Kelley currently serves on the board for Citizens in the Arts of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth's only statewide multidisciplinary arts advocacy organization. As you heard before, a graduate of York College of Pennsylvania, Kelley has over 15 years of increasing leadership roles and responsibilities within the arts and cultural community in York. She lives in York with her husband Joel, who is here with us today, and her 2 daughters, Madeline and Kaylin. Please give a warm welcome to our newest member, Kelley Gibson.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me back there? All right, first I have to start with this. Tell me when it's straight. Good? There? Yeah. All right. Point if it gets out of whack. It's something I'm very passionate about. I'd like things to be perfect as they can be. Well, thank you so much. I don't know if this has ever been done before, a person being inducted into the Rotary Club of York and then being the speaker at the Rotary, but I appreciate this opportunity to talk a little bit about the Cultural Alliance and our future plans. So we'll get started. So our mission, we are a catalyst fueling the creative energy of our community through leadership, collaboration, and sustainability in order to enrich the quality of life of all of our citizens. I didn't even read that. Did you see that? We envision a thriving York County where the arts are an integral component of economic growth and development, tourism, education, and everyday life. As Jared discussed, our past really begins with Arthur J. Gladfelter, who, as many of you in this room knew personally, was the founder of Gladfelter Insurance. He was also the founder of the Cultural Alliance of York County. So in 1999, he brought together both the corporate leadership in our community and our arts community and said there has to be a more efficient way of providing essential funding to these organizations and a way for the donors to be sure that those organizations are doing good work. He looked across the country and he found a model called the United Arts Fund. And they raise up dollars annually in a campaign and then re-grant those dollars out to operational funding for those organizations. And that's what ART built in 1999 in tandem with our corporate community and with our arts community so that we could take the burden of raising unrestricted corporate operating dollars off those partners and so that they could do their mission and do their work. Operational funding is one of the hardest dollars for these organizations to receive because we give them the dollars to just further their mission, whatever that may mean. Paying payroll, turning on lights, facilities work. It all furthers the mission. Currently, for the past 20 years, over all of that time, as we've run an annual campaign each year, we've raised more than $10.4 million in arts and culture funding for these organizations, and we've served over 286,000 residents each year through our funded partners. But what does the future look like? So for the past 20 years, we followed this model that was created in a moment in time in 1999. We had the power of Art Gladfelter to bring the corporate donors to the table and to bring the partners to the table. But as we look at our current climate, we don't look like York in 1999. So are we really serving the needs of both our corporate and our arts community? And how do we better position the Cultural Alliance to do that for the next 20 years? That's when we started the Listening Project. We, with our partner DesignQuake design thinking firm, asked the question, if the Cultural Alliance didn't exist, how would we build it? We know how we built it in 1999, and it was mostly of the real sheer will of one man. So if we're looking at our current climate today, how do we build the Cultural Alliance for the next 20 years and beyond? The process of design thinking is one that we took very seriously at the Cultural Alliance, and it has different stages to really help you to drill down into the actual heart of the matter. So we used the research. We looked all across the country at all the different United Arts Funds. There's about 40 of them across the country to say, who's doing something even better than we're doing? What's the model look like out across the country? We did all of the research in our historical history over the past 20 years of how the Cultural Alliance was founded, what those original conversations were like, and how we could do things better. We conducted empathy interviews, one-on-one interviews with partners and non-partners, funded groups and non-funded groups, donors and non-donors, to really not talk about the Cultural Alliance, but to talk about what is happening in their worlds right now. What's good for them right now? What is a struggle? What does being an arts organization in York today look like and feel like? We then took all of that empathy interview work, we found patterns that emerged, and we put ideation sessions together where we started to put things in front of partners and non-partners to say, if this existed, how would this be for you? What if we looked like this? What if we had different types of funding tiers? How would that affect you? And from all of that feedback, we then created prototypes, actual models of an organization to put in front for people to play with and feel and say, oh, I really like this. Oh, I don't understand that. Oh, this really works, this doesn't work for me. And of all of those, we've narrowed it down to create a prototype of what the Cultural Alliance could look like and will look like in the future. So here's some of the findings that we got from all of that work. Donors and our community respect the Cultural Alliance model of vetting organizations and providing operational funding. That is the hardest funding to get, and our donors want us to vet organizations and ensure they're doing the good work, but then fund them to do that work without many restrictions. The funding model of the Cultural Alliance, which was based in 1999, is outdated. The number that was established for our partners as an operational grant was based on a 1999 number. So currently our model just rolls that number forward. Well, none of the organizations that were original partners in 1999 look anything like they did in 1999. They have very different needs. In the case of the York County History Center, they were different organizations that had merged together over the years. So their needs are very different than they were in 1999. We also heard loud and clear that the Cultural Alliance should be broadening its support and opening the door wider for other organizations to receive that operational funding. Currently in our model, we have some project funding that we distribute from the annual campaign, and we heard loud and clear from donors in the community, project funding isn't really meeting that mission. Operational funding is the hardest to get, so let's open the door wider for organizations that are new, that weren't in existence in 1999, to come into the model and receive those operational dollars. A really interesting finding was that our donors and the community want us to play a role for organizations that are challenged and having serious issues, as well as brand new organizations that are struggling to get started and be sustainable. And lastly, one of my favorite outcomes is that we heard loud and clear that artists plant the seeds for change in our community, and there should be resources available to working artists in York. And I'll go over each one of these because I know they're hard to see. But this is a current Cultural Alliance prototype model. It has 4 tiers of support. We call it the life cycle prototype right now. So we would have 2 tiers that are for organizations that provide operational funding, an artist partner tier that provides resources for working artists in the community, and a transformation partner tier that would jumpstart challenged or brand new organizations that are arts-based. We will still be a Pennsylvania partner, where we have a partnership with the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts to administer state project funding throughout our territory, as well as an arts and education partner that establishes arts and education residencies through schools and community groups. That won't change. So we'll still have project funding available through the state administered dollars. So if we can look at each one of these tiers. A mission partner would be for organizations, we envision most of our current partners would fall into this tier. It is a 3-year funding cycle rather than a year-to-year funding cycle. So organizations would only have to do an interim application for 2 years. Again, this is a prototype, so things may change, but right now we're working with a percentage of budget that we would base their allocation on, so a real number that exists today, not in 1999. Right now we're working out with partners and some other organizations on a work group. What should that number be? Should it be operational income? Should it be expense? All different United Arts funds do it differently. So we're working to fine tune that. But it would be a percentage of a budget number that is in real time. And we would be able to still have that agreement with our partners that we would raise corporate unrestricted dollars through our campaign, but there would be no more blackout period for our partners. For those who are not existing partners, all new organizations that are getting operational funding would come through the Artist Impact tier. They would need to stay in that impact tier and be successfully funded for 3 years before being considered to move into mission partner tier. So that is a year-to-year agreement. It would be a percentage of budget or a cap on the dollars. Right now we're working with 15,000 would be that cap. So they could come in, and even if they're a very large organization, they can start in that tier, and we can understand financially how that will flow through as they move over into the mission tier. This would also come with services for some smaller organizations that need resources such as consulting, finances, marketing. We're working with them to determine what would those resources be and what would be most beneficial, especially for smaller organizations. Our artist partner tier, we're working right now with artists in our community through empathy interview and ideation sessions to say, what would move the needle for an artist in York today? Is it resources to make work? Is it working with the community to raise up the visibility of artists? So that would be something that we're modeling right now and would be available through this artist partner tier. We have heard loud and clear that it would need to be a rolling deadline. It's much more efficient for artists to receive funding multiple times throughout a year and be able to apply for that. So we're really excited about some of the findings we're getting from those interviews now. And that's the same with the Transformation Partnership. That's really going to be built on a case-by-case basis. Each organization is going to have very different needs. Some will need consulting for finances, some will need legal consulting, some will need financial planning. So we're really going to build that case by case with each organization that comes through that tier. But right now we're talking to organizations to find out what would be beneficial to have, what would a new organization need to really get started. We do envision this as a 3-year agreement with an organization, and that we'd show marked impact each year to remain in the Transformation Partnership. But this could be a game changer for organizations who are getting funding, but they really need more than that. When is all this going to happen? 2020. That's the goal. So now that we know what the basic prototype is looking like, it's time in 2019 for us to work on the implementation of that. So each of those 4 tiers I showed you, we now have to work through what does the application process look like? How does funding flow through it? What are we evaluating these organizations on? And how are we using that information? For artists, what does that paneling process look like? How do they apply? And what's the impact we're measuring them on for the resources available? So it's that time that we're really getting down, really into the weeds now, and developing how this rolls out for 2020. And our future really starts with all of you. We have a website, future-culturalyork.org, where all of this research and all of our findings is, as well as a way for our community to give us ideas and thoughts on what they think the Cultural Alliance should have in the future. So please visit the site if you have questions, and also let us hear your feedback. All of that gets rolled into this prototyping, and that is why it's morphing and changing as we finalize it. Questions? Yes.
Kelly, is the Creative Impact Award considered a project-based funding, and will that still exist because it's so relevant, so important, and so vital to this community?
The Creative Impact Awards is project-based funding, so we don't envision Creative Impact Award project-based funding existing in the new model. We will have Pennsylvania Council on the Arts funded projects. So we will still administer project grants. It happens at a different time of year. But also our hope is that the organizations that are currently receiving project funding from us, it would be much more beneficial for many of those organizations, and the majority of them are arts-based organizations, to become an operationally funded partner rather than project to project. So after talking with the community, it wasn't, I'll admit it, a bit surprising that we heard loud and clear project funding is not as necessary as operational funding. But it does make sense. That was our mission. That was what we were founded to do, to provide operational funding through the corporate community's campaign. So it makes a lot of sense why, but we still will have a pathway for that project funding. And we're also having conversation with other funders in the community to say, if that goes away for us, is there any pathways that open up in other funding areas and how we can get those? You're welcome. Yes? Yes.
Hi. As you stated before, York is changing. It's not what it used to be when it first got started. Its demographic is changing, numbers are changing, everything about York is changing. What is the Cultural Alliance doing to become more diverse?
Thank you.
As an organization.
Thank you for that question. So the question is, what is the Cultural Alliance doing to become more diverse? And also, how are we building this model to reflect the cultural community that we have today and in the future? So at the same time as we're working to remodel the organization, we also have an equity action plan that we've put together, and we're working with experts in our community to say, how do we ensure that this is an equitable process, both for funding organizations as well as in our own interior staff, board leadership. So we're stepping through those now so that we can ensure that we're looking through an equity lens on all of the things that we're doing. So we're not remodeling and then looking backwards. And so we have some work we're doing right now at our board level and also at our staffing level, as well as looking at how do we ensure that those who are interested in being part of the Cultural Alliance make it all the way through that process into becoming funded partners. What does the word cultural mean? I can tell you that in 1999, the way that partners were chosen were basically Art Gladfelter really kind of handpicked who became a partner of the Cultural Alliance. This is a new opportunity to open the door and say, where are we missing? What aren't we funding? Who needs to come there? Is it geographic? Should it also be demographic? And also, what about art forms that we're not funding? So it'll be some great conversation on who comes into the Cultural Alliance and how that works through the model and how that impact reverberates out through the community. Yes.
To what extent has your fundraising been fairly stable over the past 2 years? And to what extent do you anticipate needing to increase your level of fundraising to have the kind of impact you're hoping to have?
Great question. So that's a question about the annual campaign and our fundraising model and how has that been going over a number of years and how we anticipate it changing. So I will tell you that some of the research that was most interesting is that our campaign really, for the past 20 years, has grown and then sort of plateaued around 2008. I know that's not surprising about 2008 being a plateau year, but it sort of has stayed pretty well around $800,000 to $830,000 a year that we raise. This past year, 2018, we had a record year. And I think that part of it is just looking and working on changing the model to be more responsive to our community. But what was interesting was, as we looked at the research, and we also researched how our funded partners have grown, we have stayed pretty well flat or stagnant. We wondered why weren't we creeping up a little more, but our partners have grown. For the most part, most of our partners have increased their income and contributed income. And I think that part of that says that for the donors, and this was a great way to have that conversation, if our donors can also fund our cultural partners, why do our donors want us? And the answer to that question is that they want us to ensure that the work that's being done is good work, and so that we become a seal of approval. If an organization is a Cultural Alliance funded partner, then donors feel confident they can also support them in different ways. And so we have really envisioned how the model will work in the future is adding the new tiers will also enable us to add new streams of funding. So though we will continue to run an annual campaign, and that our organizational partners will be funded that way, and the model will be somewhat funded that way, we also anticipate bringing in other dedicated dollars that will help with funding those streams. The other thing that's been very different is something that I came to realize as we did this research is, in some ways the Cultural Alliance started as an experiment. Art Gladfelter said, come to the table. If it doesn't work, I'll make you whole. I'll personally pay to ensure that all the partners make what they made last year. It was a great promise to have, and it really gave partners confidence. And to the corporate community, come to the table, I believe in this, I think this will work. So it was sort of started as, let's see how this goes. And for the last 20 years, it's been a bit of, let's see how this goes this year. So what's really going to be exciting is in the future, we also want to ensure the sustainability of the Cultural Alliance so that we can be here to support the arts community. And so we are working on building our own endowment at the Cultural Alliance so that more of the dollars we raise can go out to the community. So that's also part of our sustainability plan. No more questions? Thank you so much for your time.